Ladies and gentlemen, before we dive into what might be the most explosive confrontation in professional wrestling history, I need you to understand something that's going to make your blood boil. For years, we've been sold a lie. We've been told that John Cena is the greatest of all time, the face of WWE, the man who never gives up. But here's what they don't want you to know: Cena has been protected his entire career, carefully shielded from the one man who could absolutely destroy everything he's built. And now, that protection is about to be ripped away because Brock Lesnar has made a promise that's going to change everything. Lesnar isn't just talking about beating Cena. He's talking about dismantling him, piece by piece, and when I say dismantling, I mean ending the John Cena myth once and for all. This isn't hype, this isn't entertainment, this is a legitimate threat from the most dangerous human being to ever step foot in a wrestling ring. And if you think I'm exaggerating, stick around because by the end of this video, you're going to realize that everything you thought you knew about these two men has been carefully constructed smoke and mirrors. Hit that like button if you're ready for the truth, and drop a comment telling me if you think Cena stands a chance, because honestly, I don't think he does. Let's rewind the clock and talk about how we got here. John Cena burst onto the WWE scene in the early 2000s with his rapper gimmick, talking about ruthless aggression, claiming he was going to change the business. And you know what? He did change it, but not in the way people think. Cena became the corporate champion, the guy Vince McMahon could trust to shake hands, kiss babies, and sell merchandise by the truckload. He became the sanitized, PG version of what a wrestling superstar should be. 15-time world champion, sure, but let's talk about how many of those reigns came when WWE was actively protecting him from anyone who might expose his limitations. Cena built his legacy on overcoming odds that were carefully calculated to make him look heroic while never actually putting him in real danger. He beat guys who were past their prime, defeated monsters who were scripted to fall at his feet, and every single time someone got too popular or too dangerous, they were either moved to another brand or fed to Cena to keep his machine running. Now enter Brock Lesnar. This is a completely different animal. Lesnar isn't a creation of the WWE system. He's a legitimate athlete who conquered amateur wrestling at the highest level, became the youngest WWE champion in history, then walked away from wrestling entirely to pursue mixed martial arts. He became the UFC heavyweight champion, proving he could hurt people in a real fight, not just in a scripted environment. When Lesnar returned to WWE, he didn't come back as just another superstar. He came back as a final boss, an attraction, a weapon of mass destruction that WWE could only unleash sparingly because he was too dangerous, too real, too overwhelming for the normal roster to handle. Lesnar ended The Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania, something nobody thought was possible. He demolished John Cena so badly at SummerSlam that it looked like a grown man beating up a child. 16 German suplexes, and Cena looked absolutely lost, confused, and broken. That match should have ended the debate right there, but instead, WWE did what they always do with Cena. They gave him his win back, protected him, rebuilt him, and pretended like that massacre never really mattered. But here's where things get interesting and where the tension between these two men goes from professional rivalry to something much darker and more personal. Brock Lesnar doesn't need WWE. He doesn't need the money, he doesn't need the fame, and he certainly doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Lesnar shows up when he wants to, works the schedule he demands, and gets paid more per appearance than most wrestlers make in a year. He has leverage because WWE knows they can't replicate what he brings to the table. Cena, on the other hand, has spent recent years trying to cement his legacy, trying to become the undisputed face of wrestling history, trying to tie or break Ric Flair's championship record. Cena needs these moments, needs these marquee matches, needs to be seen as the guy who can still go with anyone. And that fundamental difference in motivation creates a powder keg because Lesnar doesn't care about Cena's legacy, doesn't care about his feelings, and absolutely doesn't care about playing along with the narrative that Cena deserves respect. The tension started building publicly when Cena began calling out part-time wrestlers, clearly directing his frustration at guys like Lesnar who show up a handful of times per year, get massive paychecks, and take spots that full-time wrestlers believe they deserve. Cena talked about dedication, about loyalty to the business, about earning your position through sweat and sacrifice. It was a thinly veiled attack on Lesnar's work schedule and his approach to the business. But here's what Cena either forgot or chose to ignore: Brock Lesnar doesn't have to earn anything anymore. He already proved himself in ways Cena never could. Lesnar proved he could fight for real, proved he could be a draw without needing to cut 20-minute promos every week, proved that less is more when you're an actual attraction rather than an overexposed company mascot. When Lesnar caught wind of Cena's comments, his response was chilling in its simplicity. He didn't cut a long promo, didn't go on social media to defend himself. He simply told Paul Heyman to deliver a message Cena should be very careful about what he wishes for because Lesnar would be happy to remind him what happened the last time they faced each other. Paul Heyman is the perfect mouthpiece for Lesnar's menace because Heyman understands how to build dread better than anyone in the business. Heyman doesn't just hype matches, he makes you believe that someone is genuinely in danger. When Heyman talks about Lesnar dismantling Cena, he's not using typical wrestling hyperbole. He's describing as surgical destruction, breaking down exactly how Lesnar plans to attack Cena's body, targeting his neck that's already been surgically repaired multiple times, going after his shoulders, his back, every vulnerable point that years of carrying WWE on his back have weakened. Heyman talks about Lesnar the way you talk about a natural disaster, something inevitable and unstoppable that you can only hope to survive rather than defeat. And the terrifying part is that Heyman isn't exaggerating. We've seen what Lesnar does to people. We've seen him legitimately injure opponents, break bodies, and end careers. When Heyman says Lesnar is going to dismantle Cena, he means it literally. Cena's response to this threat has been fascinating because you can see the internal conflict playing out in real time. Part of Cena wants to maintain his never-give-up superhero persona, the guy who doesn't back down from anyone or anything. But there's another part of Cena, the part that remembers SummerSlam, the part that knows what it feels like to be completely helpless against Lesnar's assault, and that part is genuinely concerned. Cena has tried to frame this confrontation as him standing up for the full-time locker room, positioning himself as the defender of wrestling tradition against Lesnar's mercenary approach. But everyone can see through it. This isn't about defending tradition or standing up for the boys in the back. This is personal. This is about Cena trying to prove that the SummerSlam destruction was a fluke, that he can hang with Lesnar, that his legacy isn't built on smoke and mirrors. And that desperation makes him vulnerable in ways we've never seen before. The backstage stories about their interactions paint an even more tense picture. Multiple sources have reported that Lesnar and Cena barely speak to each other outside of required promotional appearances. There's no friendship, no mutual respect, just cold professional distance with an undercurrent of genuine animosity. Lesnar reportedly views Cena as everything wrong with modern WWE, the overexposed, overscripted, corporately approved product that prioritizes merchandise sales over actual competition. Cena supposedly sees Lesnar as a part-timer who doesn't respect the business enough to commit to it full-time, someone coasting on past accomplishments rather than building new stars and helping the next generation. Both perspectives have merit, which is why their conflict feels so real and so compelling. This isn't manufactured heat created by writers in a conference room. This is legitimate philosophical opposition between two men who represent completely different eras and approaches to professional wrestling. The physical disparity between them cannot be overstated. Brock Lesnar is a genetic freak, a once-in-a-generation athlete with a combination of size, speed, strength, and legitimate fighting ability that shouldn't exist in one human body. He's 6'3", walks around at nearly 300 pounds in the off-season, and can move like a cruiserweight despite his massive frame. His amateur wrestling credentials are impeccable: NCAA Division I heavyweight champion, multiple-time All-American. His professional fighting record speaks for itself: UFC heavyweight champion who defeated legitimate killers like Randy Couture, Frank Mir, and Shane Carwin. When Lesnar hits you, it's not wrestling theater. Those German suplexes aren't carefully choreographed dance moves. He's actually throwing you across the ring with enough force to cause real damage. His F5 finishing move involves lifting a grown man onto his shoulders and spinning them around before driving them into the mat, and he makes it look effortless. John Cena is certainly no slouch physically. He's been consistently jacked throughout his career, clearly putting in serious time in the gym. He's strong enough to lift guys like Big Show and Edge on his shoulders for the attitude adjustment. His conditioning is excellent, allowing him to work long matches and maintain a brutal schedule for years. But here's the thing: gym strength and wrestling strength are different from fighting strength, from the kind of functional, explosive power that Lesnar possesses naturally and has honed through years of actual combat training. Cena has never been in a real fight, at least not at the level Lesnar has experienced in the UFC octagon. When Lesnar gets hit, his instinct isn't to sell it theatrically for the cameras. His instinct is to hurt you back, and hurt you worse. That's a fundamental difference that no amount of weight training can overcome. The psychological warfare has been ramping up significantly. Lesnar has been sending messages through his training videos, posting footage of him ragdolling heavyweight training partners, hitting pads with devastating power, drilling takedowns with former UFC fighters. The subtext is clear: while you're out there cutting promos and doing media appearances, I'm preparing to actually hurt you. Cena has responded with his own training footage, showing impressive strength with heavy compound lifts, but there's something almost desperate about it, like he's trying to convince himself as much as the audience that he can compete physically with Lesnar. The comment sections on these videos tell the story better than any analysis could. Under Lesnar's videos, people are hyped, excited, bloodthirsty. Under Cena's videos, people are concerned, worried, and questioning whether he really wants this fight. The business dynamics add another layer of complexity to this situation. WWE is caught in a difficult position because both men represent significant financial value, but in very different ways. Cena is the consistent, reliable draw who shows up every week, does press, makes appearances, and keeps the machine running. He's the guy sponsors love, the guy who parents trust with their kids, the brand ambassador who never causes problems or generates negative publicity. Losing Cena, or worse, having him publicly destroyed by Lesnar again, damages that carefully cultivated image. But Lesnar is the special attraction, the card that WWE can play when they need an undeniable main event, the trump card that guarantees mainstream attention and big money. WWE needs both of them, but they need them in different ways, and managing that balance while building to a confrontation that one of them has to definitively lose creates all kinds of political backstage tension. There are reports that Vince McMahon himself is conflicted about how to book this situation. On one hand, McMahon has always loved Lesnar, recognized him as a genuine once-in-a-generation talent, and given him preferential treatment throughout both of his WWE runs. McMahon respects real toughness and legitimate athletic ability, and Lesnar has both in abundance. But McMahon also invested decades into building John Cena, protected him through countless booking decisions, and sees Cena as his final great creation before Triple H and others took over more creative control. Having Lesnar demolish Cena again would essentially be admitting that the part-time guy is more valuable than the full-time company man, and that's a dangerous precedent to set for the rest of the roster. The political maneuvering behind the scenes is apparently intense, with different factions in WWE management advocating for different outcomes based on their own interests and philosophies about where the company should go. The fan base is completely split on this issue, and that division is part of what makes it so compelling. You have the Cena fans who grew up watching him overcome odds, who bought his merchandise, who believe in the never-give-up mentality he represents. They see Cena as the heart and soul of WWE, the guy who showed up every single week for years, worked through injuries, carried the company through difficult periods, and earned his position through sheer consistency and dedication. They view Lesnar as an outsider who doesn't respect the business, who takes opportunities away from full-time wrestlers, and who represents everything wrong with modern WWE's attraction-based booking philosophy. Then you have the Lesnar fans who value authenticity and legitimate toughness over scripted heroism. They see Lesnar as the real deal, a guy who proved himself in actual combat, who doesn't need to rely on promos and storylines to get over because his presence alone is enough. They view Cena as overrated, overpushed, and overprotected, a corporate creation rather than an organic superstar. Both groups are passionate, both groups are vocal, and the tension between them mirrors the tension between the two men themselves. Social media has become a battleground where these factions clash daily. Every Lesnar appearance generates thousands of comments arguing about whether his destruction of Cena would be entertainment or would damage WWE's long-term storytelling. Every Cena promo generates equal amounts of support and skepticism about whether he can back up his words when actually confronted with Lesnar's physical superiority. The discourse has become genuinely heated, with people taking sides not just about who would win a match but about what kind of wrestling they want to see, what values they think WWE should promote, and what constitutes legitimate toughness versus scripted entertainment. This isn't just about two wrestlers anymore. It's become a proxy war for competing visions of what professional wrestling should be in the modern era. The history between them adds so much weight to every interaction. That SummerSlam match was supposed to be Cena's big showcase, his chance to prove he could go with anyone including the most dangerous man in the company. Instead, it turned into a one-sided beating that looked more like an execution than a competitive match. Lesnar threw Cena around like he was nothing, landing German suplex after German suplex while Cena looked completely lost. The crowd's reaction evolved from shock to laughter to genuine concern. Cena's offense was shrugged off like it was nothing. His comeback attempts were swatted away with dismissive ease. And when Lesnar finally decided to end it, the F5 looked almost merciful compared to the sustained beating that preceded it. That match fundamentally changed how people viewed both men. Lesnar was elevated to final boss status, an unbeatable force that nobody could hope to overcome through normal means. Cena was exposed as vulnerable, mortal, and possibly overmatched when facing truly elite competition. WWE tried to undo the damage by giving Cena his win back, but it never felt earned or believable. The rematch was booked to make it look more competitive, to suggest that Cena had figured Lesnar out, but everyone knew the truth. In a real fight, in a real athletic competition, Lesnar would destroy Cena every single time. The subsequent wins Cena got were attributed to interference, to weapons, to every circumstance except Cena being legitimately better than Lesnar. And now here we are again, with Lesnar promising to dismantle Cena, but this time it feels different. This time Lesnar seems genuinely angry rather than just professionally dominant. This time there's a sense that Lesnar isn't content to just win. He wants to prove a point, wants to definitively end any debate about who is the real apex predator in WWE, wants to dismantle not just Cena's body but his entire legacy. The vow to dismantle Cena is specific and calculated. Lesnar isn't talking about pinning him or making him submit. He's talking about breaking him down systematically, piece by piece, targeting every weakness, exploiting every vulnerability, until there's nothing left. Heyman has elaborated on this vision in terrifying detail, describing how Lesnar plans to go after Cena's neck with targeted suplexes, how he'll work over Cena's shoulders to take away his ability to lift opponents for his finishing move, how he'll punish Cena's ribs and midsection to take away his conditioning advantage, how he'll use his wrestling background to control positions and prevent any of Cena's trademark comebacks. This isn't the typical wrestling story of good versus evil or hero versus monster. This is a predator explaining exactly how he's going to take apart his prey, and having the skill and experience to actually follow through on those threats. What makes this even more intense is that both men are at interesting points in their careers. Cena isn't the full-time workhorse anymore. He's transitioned into a part-time role himself, focusing on Hollywood and other business ventures while making occasional WWE appearances. His body has taken tremendous punishment over the years, and while he maintains an impressive physique, there are questions about how much he has left in the tank for a truly brutal physical encounter. Lesnar remains in peak physical condition, still training like a fighter, still capable of performing at an elite level despite being in his 40s. If anything, Lesnar has gotten smarter and more efficient as he's gotten older, understanding how to maximize damage with minimum effort, how to pace himself through matches, and how to exploit opponents psychologically as well as physically. The potential consequences of their confrontation extend far beyond just one match or one storyline. If Lesnar dismantles Cena as thoroughly as he promises, it could fundamentally reshape WWE's power structure and storytelling approach. It would be an admission that the part-time attraction model is more valuable than the full-time company man philosophy. It would validate Lesnar's approach and potentially encourage other top stars to demand similar limited schedules and increased leverage. It could damage Cena's legacy irreparably, making him look like a paper champion whose accomplishments were more about political protection than actual dominance. On the other hand, if WWE tries to protect Cena and give him a competitive showing or even a victory, it risks looking completely unbelievable given the history and physical disparity between the two men. It would confirm criticisms that WWE prioritizes corporate interests over authentic storytelling, that they're unwilling to let their chosen stars look vulnerable even when logic demands it. The locker room reaction to this escalating tension is reportedly mixed. Some wrestlers support Cena, seeing him as a representative of the working-class performers who show up consistently and do the hard work of keeping WWE running week to week. They resent Lesnar's preferential treatment and see his dominance as unfair to guys who put in more time and effort. Others privately root for Lesnar, tired of Cena's protected status and eager to see someone finally expose him without WWE stepping in to rehabilitate his image afterward. There's also a significant portion of the roster that just wants to see an amazing spectacle, recognizing that love them or hate them, when Cena and Lesnar are in the ring together, something special happens. The energy is different, the stakes feel real, and the outcome genuinely matters in a way that most wrestling matches don't. The media coverage has been extensive, with mainstream outlets picking up on the story because Lesnar's UFC background gives him crossover appeal beyond traditional wrestling fans. Sports networks are covering this like it's a legitimate combat sports rivalry rather than just sports entertainment programming. That mainstream attention adds pressure to both men and to WWE to deliver something that lives up to the hype. The scrutiny is intense, with every statement analyzed, every training video dissected, every social media interaction examined for hidden meaning. This has transcended typical wrestling storylines and become a genuine cultural moment that people outside the wrestling bubble are paying attention to and forming opinions about. What's particularly fascinating is watching how Cena is handling this psychologically. Throughout his career, Cena has been the confident one, the guy who never showed doubt, who always believed he would find a way to win. But you can see cracks in that armor now. In recent interviews, there's a tension in his voice when Lesnar's name comes up. His usual bravado seems forced, like he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else. He talks about respecting Lesnar's accomplishments, but you can hear the underlying frustration and maybe even fear about what's coming. Cena knows better than anyone what Lesnar is capable of because he's experienced it firsthand. He knows that all the motivational speeches and never-give-up mentality in the world won't matter when Lesnar decides to turn their encounter into a demonstration of pure physical dominance. Lesnar's psychology is the complete opposite. He's relaxed, confident to the point of arrogance, and seemingly enjoying the entire situation. There's no stress, no doubt, no concern about the outcome. When asked about Cena, Lesnar either smirks and stays silent or delivers brief, dismissive comments that make it clear he doesn't consider Cena to be in his league. That psychological dominance might be even more devastating than the physical beating to come. Lesnar has already won the mental warfare, already established himself as the alpha predator while reducing Cena to something closer to prey, trying to convince itself it has a chance of survival. The timing of this confrontation is significant too. WWE is at a crossroads, trying to build new stars while also relying on established names to maintain their business. The success or failure of the Cena vs. Lesnar situation will influence booking decisions for years to come. If the part-timer destroys the former franchise player, it sends a message about what WWE values and prioritizes. If they try to protect Cena and make it competitive, it potentially damages the credibility of their storytelling. There's no easy answer, no clean way to resolve this that satisfies everyone, which is part of why the tension keeps escalating without any clear resolution in sight. We also can't ignore the personal pride factor. These are two incredibly competitive men who have accomplished nearly everything possible in their field. Neither wants to look weak or inferior to the other. For Cena, allowing Lesnar to dismantle him again would be admitting that everything people say about him being protected and overrated is true. For Lesnar, failing to dominate Cena would damage his aura of invincibility and call into question whether he's still the apex predator he claims to be. Pride makes this personal in ways that go beyond storylines or booking decisions. Both men need to win this confrontation not just for their careers but for their own self-image and sense of worth. The vow to dismantle Cena isn't just talk from Lesnar. It's a promise, a guarantee, a threat that he has both the intention and the capability to fulfill. Every day that passes, the tension grows. Every interview adds fuel to the fire. Every training video raises the stakes. We're building towards something that could be genuinely historic, a confrontation that will be remembered and discussed for decades regardless of how it plays out. The question isn't whether it will be significant. The question is whether anyone is truly prepared for what Brock Lesnar is promising to do. So here we are, watching two titans on a collision course that seems inevitable and terrifying. Cena represents everything traditional about WWE: loyalty, consistency, the company man who does what's best for business. Lesnar represents something else entirely: authenticity, dominance, the idea that talent and ability should be rewarded above all else regardless of corporate considerations. Their conflict is about more than just two men. It's about competing philosophies, different eras, alternative visions of what wrestling should be. And when they finally collide, when Lesnar attempts to fulfill his vow to dismantle Cena, we'll all find out which vision prevails.